I've been
What was that
sitting on that.
sound?
I have a soundboard. I've been sitting on that ever since last episode. It's
What?
been yeah.
It's been good.
Uh
Are you going to introduce the podcast then?
I should. Welcome to OxPod, conversations with students at the University of Oxford. Today, it's myself, Rick L, and it's Luther. Again, he was so good
Hello.
last episode that we've brought him back again.
Yeah. So 100% what happens. Totally wasn't someone else who cancelled last second. So he's like, "Do you want to come on?" I was like, "Sure." You know what? I'm down for a chat. Always am. But
Luther is
yeah,
a second year experimental psychology undergraduate at St. Cat's, and he's here to tell us about how things are going for him this week. The week has been so action packed
yes,
that
he's so action packed. Wait, did we record the last one last week? I feel like we didn't.
um I mean we're doing it now. Everything we're going for it.
We're
Go
going
ahead.
for it. Okay.
Tell us how your week has been.
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's been about like 8 hours plus of revision every day, and that has been the week. That has been the week. I won't lie to you.
God damn.
It's a life. It's a life. This is what happens when you fail to attend all of the lectures in the term. To be honest, and you refuse to write notes because you're like, I have the whole summer to write notes, and then it gets the summer, and you're like, I can't be bothered to write notes until the month before you have to go back appears, and you're like, oh, I need to write my notes because I will not physically have time to write all of these notes if I don't write them now. So that's where
Goodness
I am.
God. I mean, you're ahead of me because I missed a couple lectures and I watched those and wrote them out. But I have done not enough revision yet. I have
It's
like
not.
this
It's not
genetics
really revision.
internship.
Well,
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm like learning a few lectures, but hey, I guess it's kind of a revision. But to be honest, I forgot a lot of it, so it's kind of learning as well. What were you saying about your internship?
Well, I I've basically gone through a lot of the things that I wanted to do this summer, and revision was sort of at the tail end of it. And this last month was, I did bits and bobs, but this last month was supposed to be only revision. And then a person that I know offered for me to do a small sort of project with them that was in a field that I don't know much about. And it sounded really cool. And there's the potential for me to be on the byline of a scientific article. And it's just a learning experience. So, very, very cool. This is actually a former experimental psychology student.
Oh, nice.
However, the task itself comprises a Word document that he usually sends to his graduate students. He's got a PhD now, I'm pretty sure. And so
Technically, you're a graduate student.
technically, but the University of Oxford
Technically.
won't let me into MCRs, so I don't know what's up with that.
Oh, they're not.
Um,
Oh, that's a shame.
you have to be doing a graduate degree at Oxford. It's not enough to just finish an undergrad.
Whatever, man.
Yeah, which sucks. Regardless, what the job actually comprises is this huge Word document of different articles on Mendelian randomization, and then our studio and tutorials in our studio, and then the project. And he's really kind about like, hey man, just message me if you have any questions. But you know how when you're so like new to something that you're not even really sure what to
Yeah.
ask yet? I'm just getting out of that. But it's good because I was putting it off for a while and I had some like health issues. But now that revision is like burning, it's pushing me to like get it done ASAP. So yeah, it's
Good
been
luck.
cool so far. I don't know. I feel like if I don't get it done by this Wednesday, I'm just gonna have to say like, look, man, I need to put this on the back burner again because I just running out of time on the revision.
Right.
But
Do you know what I realized though, in terms
yeah.
of revision? We had a total of 50 lectures last term, and we'll have another 50 lectures and a bit less in the third term. So, maximum around like 130 lectures is what we'll have for this year.
Oh
And the amount of
goodness.
content that they pack into an Oxford lecture is
Yeah.
probably
Like
equivalent
content
to about
rich.
2 or 3 of another uni's lectures.
Yeah. Well, we got 42 from social psych and perception, and then we've got
8.
7.
Is it
So
7?
then 7
Okay,
experimental
it's
design and
7.
methods. I have a little poster up there where I calculated if I just do 2 a day, then all I need is 38 days to do it. But
2 a
I
day
have
is
not
still
been
quite a
doing.
lot.
I haven't
Like,
been doing that. Yeah, that's true. Well, initially I thought I was going to watch them all, but now I've just got the notes. I'm like, that's going to take forever. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
reread my notes and then like try to organize them. I always tried out these convoluted study methods, and then like a day later, I realized, if I just do the thing that I originally did, that's going to get me like 80% efficiency, but without reducing my stamina to zero after 20 minutes of study. So I don't know. I'm now skeptical of a lot of the study methods that are derived from psychological experiments. And I think I mentioned this 100 times to you and just to the universe at large. With those psychological experiments, the participants are compelled to do it that way for a certain amount of time. But when you're at home revising or doing homework, you're not compelled to do it. You can just put it off and procrastinate. When you have a researcher in a white lab coat, we know from the Milgram studies that the mere act of just having a researcher there with that scientific authority is enough to get people to do a lot of unsavory things. So it stands to reason that if you want to get better at study, you just need to ask like a friend, or preferably one that you don't really know well, or go on Fiverr and just get a stranger with a white lab coat to like stand like
But
this.
you also have the knowledge that it's just some random guy standing in the camera telling you to do your work. Like, I don't think that's gonna work in theory, realistically.
Didn't didn't they have like what was it? There was a thank goodness that this is not what Milgram's shock experiments were not. They were supposedly about learning, but here we are using them for learning. When they had two proper researchers arguing, that reduced obedience. But I wonder if I don't know. They should have done a variation before it was deemed unethical on just getting a random person to wear the lab coat and then seeing how people react to
That's
that.
true because like the variation was like they just got some random guy to like stand in for them, and like they were wearing like not a lab coat. But what if they were wearing a lab coat? Would that have changed it? Like if they
Yeah,
didn't know
if
that it wasn't a researcher, I assume they would just assume that it was another researcher, and the like authority would just continue over.
well, because of the Stanford prison experiments, that was more about how you view yourself and how your behavior changes when you're wearing a
That's
uniform.
true.
And but it would be interesting if you explicitly told someone, "Hey, this is just a person on Fiverr who's doing a gig for $5 an hour, to stand over you." If people would just, I don't know, it feels like it could. There's that guy. I don't know if you've seen the YouTube video in Japan whose job is supposedly to do nothing. But what he actually does is he gets paid a fixed amount per hour and he goes with people all day and he just says nothing. He listens. So if people talk to him, he'll just nod and process it. And he just walks around. And on the day that they were filming the documentary, I think it was his client was maybe a 30-year-old businessman who didn't really have any friends. I think he was attending either a funeral or something else.
Mhm.
And so you saw that this guy was actually a phenomenal professional because this client, obviously, he didn't want to talk to anyone, but he wanted somebody around. He just wanted a person to be there just for support. And so he could talk to him. But he knew that this person wouldn't then pass on anything that he'd said. So it's like people joke that psychologists and personal trainers are if you don't have friends that will listen or that will go to the gym with you. So I guess this is just like a person who's just going to take it all, just going to, absorb all of your emotions like a sponge and then charge you a bill. It's a weird dynamic, but there should be the same thing for study. Just like a slice of like not the full range of a friend who actually has needs and dreams and goals, but like a roboticized, in a way that's like what a car mechanic is. It's like you could have a friend that knows how to do that, but you're just getting the slice of human being for that particular purpose.
I mean, that
Yeah,
makes sense. But also, I feel like the demand for that kind of thing in, for example, the UK is not as much as in Japan. Because, in Japan, they have like so many different people you can hire out for so many different things. Like, you can literally pay someone to lie in bed with them. Like, the
I think
things
we
in,
have that in the UK. We 100%
well, it's probably illegal.
have.
Do you think it's a legal thing in the UK? I don't know. But it's a legal thing in Japan, and it's quite a common thing as well.
Oh wait,
Um,
to just be in, not as a euphemism for
No, no, no,
intercourse, but to just be.
not as a euphemism. It's technically illegal in Japan to do that as well. But I'm just saying, just to lie, literally just to lie down with someone in bed, or I guess you could. I heard there is like places in America where you could do that too. So probably also in the UK. But I think it's more so common in Japan to literally just hire someone to like pretend, for example, to be. There's people who you hire out to pretend to be your girlfriend to show to your parents. Like for example, pretend you were in Japan and you're a gay man with a preference for men obviously, and then
A gay man with a preference
yeah,
for
yeah.
men. That's
No,
that's
no,
very.
but like gay, not gay is in like not bisexual, just like a
Oh,
bisexual.
it's used that way as well. I didn't know. All right, I'm
Yeah,
learning.
yeah. Sometimes people use gay just as bisexual, so I'm just specifying here. Um, but so imagine you have this gay man, and he doesn't want to tell his parents that he's gay because in Japanese culture, it's like for some reason it's like still frowned upon. They still have to work on that in their culture. So they hire a person to be their girlfriend for the day to go and visit their parents and show it as pretend as if like they have a wife or like a partner of some sort, so that their parents will be like not worried about them. And that's actually quite a common thing that happens, which is quite insane to be honest. Like to have that kind of service in the UK would someone would be like that's so weird, but in Japan it's like it's not a weird thing if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's interesting. Because I mean, part of the I really need to justify the 4 years of econ that I did, even though largely that facilitated my coming into Oxford and sometimes peppering it onto the CV. I don't know. Anyway, point is that um, it's almost ridiculous how much it benefits a country when they free up their economy, which is to
Mm.
say that they adopt neoliberal policies. So you can pretty much do anything on the market provided it doesn't um, contravene regulations, as opposed to a sort of protectionist or command economy, or people are going to call me out for putting those two. Let's say command economy, where the government says you can do nothing but what we tell you to do, rather than you can do everything except what we tell you not to do. And so I guess in a way, Japan's more sort of a uh, mixed market, free market than the UK in that respect. Because if there's buyers and there's sellers, and it isn't leading to sort of negative impacts on third parties, then why not? It's an industry. People are being creative, and yet, I guess you could say that the externality, sort of the cost, the negative outcome for that doesn't involve the buyer or the seller would be the parents. That would be really the same way that if you have a factory that sells oil and dumps its waste product into a lake, the buyer buys the oil and they pay a cost, and the seller pays the cost of like electricity. But then there's the unpriced cost of the lake waste that goes on to a third person that isn't part of the transaction, and so they're bearing a cost without getting a benefit. But which is like that's at the bare bones, putting taxes on negative externalities and putting subsidies on positive externalities. Like when children get educated, the whole country benefits largely. So you want to put tax money onto educating. It'd be interesting to see if that gets taxed. If we could get
That's true.
social deception tax, if we could get all of those services in the UK, but then say, look, they negatively impact society, so they'll just be extra expensive. So only the rich can afford to deceive their loved ones. I don't know. It's
Interesting.
interesting.
And going
It's
back to the
interesting.
point with the
Hmm.
lab member, what were you trying to suggest in terms of hiring someone for that, like someone in a lab coat or whatever?
I think that just the fact of being observed has there was that whole hubbub in physics about how merely observing particles changes the way that they behave, and I think a lot of that was subject to misinterpretation. And obviously, with my lack of physical physics knowledge, I
Physical
can't really
physics
weigh in.
knowledge. Nice.
As opposed to mental, intangible. We're just going to call each other out on these tautologies. It's so the point is that um, I think just having a person looking at you in the same room as you makes you behave differently.
Oh yeah.
And to the same degree that that might be introducing bias onto experiments about study methods, you could bootstrap it into just doing better. If you have the money to get somebody to just look, or I saw on uni days, there was this thing called like never study alone, which is a bit of a weird motto, but the idea is that it's like this eternal group chat with all with like hundreds of students, and you can log on to just study, and then everybody can sort of chime in and look. Although ostensibly the only people that will actually see you on the webcam are the ones that aren't studying. Because if they got their head down, then and then also you'd say, well, there's the audio. Do you really want to hear the audio of like 100 people concurrently studying? I don't know.
I mean, I was actually going to suggest something there, which was what if you just like put your phone like to the side and just live stream on Twitch and literally just broadcast yourself revising to literally no one, but the chances are that someone might come on and watch you. So maybe that will motivate someone to actually behave in a way that's I guess like more conducive. Is that the right word? I don't know if that's
That's
the
the
right word.
one. That's the one.
Yeah, to revision and stuff and just like working, I guess.
Hmm. I've seen people do that. There's people on YouTube and Twitch that have that whole study with
Yeah,
me.
study with me, right?
Yeah, 24 hours study marathon. There's a couple I've seen a couple people do that and I've wondered like, "Yo, what is it that you have to study for 15 hours a day for a year?" Yo, like where are you at right now? Did you make it to CERN? Are you working on the collider at 17? Is I don't think that at any point in my life, even if I had the so admirable willpower to study for 16 hours a day for like a year,
Who's
I
doing
think
that
I'd run
every
out of
day?
content.
No one's
Yeah,
doing that every day, surely.
unless they like do a little recording on the sly and they have an algorithm that just mixes in, and so when they get up there's a green screen behind them that seamlessly transitions. So I actually
Mm.
only study 2 in the morning and 2 in the evening, but the rest is just a remix of deep fake
I
algorithms
mean, in all
reproducing them.
honesty, like you could literally record yourself for like 6 hours and then just use little clips to replay and just like make it look seamless and then just like repost that. Like,
There was a conspiracy theory going around in Russia about how Putin is actually has like 6 actors, and so that's the way that he's able to campaign across all of Russia, which is so huge. Is the
interesting.
and so that he would just get lookalikes to go from town to town, so that on the one hand, different parts of Russia could feel like he took out the time to visit them, when in
Ah,
reality, he just got a lookalike to be really far away on stage and be like, "Yes, I've always been supportive of this small Siberian Soviet town that has like 3 factories and a garage. I love you guys. Thank you. Goodbye." There's no way to verify it, hence
yeah,
conspiracy theory, but it does make you wonder that 100% at least one modern politician has tried that tactic. There's no way
surely
that like
somewhere,
of
yeah.
yeah.
Although
Yeah.
I would argue that with current video technology, like surely someone would have spotted it out. Unless someone looks exactly the same as that politician, which is highly unlikely unless they've managed to find their doppelganger somewhere.
Or just like putting deep fake algorithms onto it. When it comes to these sort of, and I use conspiracy theory in not as a derogatory term or as a sort of um, something admirable, but just to say that it's the kind of idea that you can't verify by the way that it's set up. The whole premise is that it's hidden from the public. But surely after although that was that amusing, um, well, now it's kind of sad with Queen Elizabeth II, but setting that aside, there was a deep fake of her um, doing some comedic speech, and so if that's available to members of the general public, there's been a few military advisory boards or whatever that have been like, look, we can just put that onto the face of a person and we can
Yeah,
just make that video happen. Especially with the smoke and mirrors of like, if there's a big event going on, I feel like a lot of the time people don't pay attention to details. If you can get the big picture going and there's the music and the fanfare and somebody comes onto stage, then this podcast is rapidly approaching InfoWars levels. it went from just like, revision onto like, so listen, the entire world is conspiring against you,
I don't
listener.
know how we got here. How did we even get to this conversation? We
Study
talked about
skills. We were talking
study
about study
skills,
skills.
and then hiring someone. Oh yeah, hiring someone
Yeah,
to
hiring
watch you, but
someone.
then hiring someone to look like you.
Yeah. That
That
could
makes
also be a
sense.
good service if you just got a lookalike to go around
It'll be
to
a very
just be,
specific
yeah,
service that you need to find the lookalike initially.
that's true. That'd be very premium.
I,
Unless,
I think
yeah,
I might have found my lookalike actually, because once in my old
oh,
sixth form, that in the year below me there was this guy who literally just looked like me, but like from 2 years ago. And like everyone used to like go up to him and say like, "Hey, I used to go by Josh because my name's Joshua Lisa, double barrel first name. It's a Filipino thing." Um, but you'd be there. Everyone would go up to me like, "Hey, Josh," and then like he'd turn around and it's just not me. But he looks like me. That's the thing. But he looks like me from before. So it's like a bit of a weird thing. I don't really
Interesting.
understand how like, and he's not even Filipino. I'm pretty sure this guy was Bengali, and he looks pretty much exactly like me, but like a bit taller. Does it
Hmm.
make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a we take for granted meiosis. Is that how we pronounce it in English? I
Meiosis,
learned my biology in Russia, or in a
meiosis in
Russian
English.
school. Meiosis. Meiosis is so cool. It's a creative act that underlies all of life,
What's
and
meiosis again? Is that the?
um, so you've got mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis is just copy and paste, and meiosis is like jazz remixing when the chromosomes is like crossing over. Where I
Oh
know I'm mixing
yeah, oh
metaphors.
yeah. Okay.
When you get,
When you
you
was
know,
that where how
the
you make like the sperm cells and stuff?
is when the sperm and the egg they have the gametes. Or I think not the like,
I think it is the
um
gametes. The gamete cells are made from meiosis.
biomajors coming in here ready to be a guest on the podcast just to explain how we're wrong. But to put it very scientifically and precisely, chromosomes from the man and the woman and they're half and half just collide together and they sort of rumble and then they mix and match and random parts just get put together and then you get
The gametes.
the zygote
Wait,
will
no,
have
no, Rick, that is not. That, that is
Isn't
not
it
meiosis, sorry guy. That's
what
fusion. Oh my
what
god.
becomes the blastula and develops eventually into a fetus? The hot mixtape will inherit genes from the mother and inherit genes from the
That
father,
is this is not
but
meiosis, Rick. I don't think he.
100%. There's mitosis and meiosis.
No, but
Meiosis is the one that
meiosis is when the
sexually
gametes are made.
I
Me-
no, hold on. This is being recorded, so I'm sure one of us is gonna get blasted. Probably both of us. It was my understanding that mitosis is the one when it's amoebas or not asexual animals that just sort of copy themselves. There's very little genetic variation, and the beauty of sexual animals is that um, the whole sort of you can almost think of it as
Yeah, you combine the
an
DNA from the gametes, right? When the
you
sperm fuses
combine the
into the egg.
DNA,
But that
but what's
process is not
cool about it,
meiosis.
really?
From my understanding, from my A level biology knowledge, anyways, is from meiosis is when do you know how like sperm and egg cells have like half of the DNA? It's because it's split into like the cell split and then split again into like basically to have half of the DNA with stomach from the mom, stomach
Yeah,
from the dad, and then
yeah.
that's meiosis. I'm pretty sure to create the gametes because
Well, they come together and then they cross
coming
over. Where
together's the fusion of them though. I don't think that's meiosis.
okay, I'm not gonna go any deeper because wait, I'm digging myself
we'll
into a
we'll
trench
Google
here.
this. We'll Google this afterwards.
We'll Google this
If there are any
afterwards.
biologists, hop on this podcast and talk with Rick about it and tell him how
We
he's
got
wrong,
him hook, line, and
or tell him
sinker.
how he was right that I was wrong. But like,
The
it's what it
idea
is.
being that at some stage for sexual animals, um, at some point in the development of fetus, it's the combination of half and half is semi-random. There's this whole idea in Mendelian randomization that it's almost like the perfect randomized control trial because rather than an experimenter randomly assigning a person to one group or another, this process, the name of which the process,
We'll just call it
um,
a process.
randomly puts together alleles. So if one of the parents has a dominant and a recessive allele, you might get either one, and so it's my superficial understanding that for all intents and purposes, we just treat that biological mechanism as random, which is insane.
Mm.
So the underlying sort of this is all to talk about the guy who looks 2 years younger than you. That within the human population, within the population of any sexually reproducing animals, um, we just have like this fundamentally creative process that's mysterious, and that's so cool that you just put
That is
together
really
not
cool.
on you're not just half and half of your mother and father. You take variants from them, and you randomly put them together, and then you bust out of your mother. Okay, that's not that. and then you and,
You bust out.
and then you're
As you're
born.
raring to go, if a
That's
baby's
a
raring
better
to go,
way
they're
to
like, "Let me out, bro."
let me out. You're born, and then you're like nature's experiment because nature's like, let me put these
Yeah,
together.
and
So,
you know they actually lied
yeah.
to us about what a C-section is. They say that they cut it open. It's actually the baby busting open. What
Oh
happened?
no, that's giving me Ridley Scott vibes with Alien. Oh,
Oh god,
I am sure that scene in Alien made a lot of women watching that just not want to get a C-section. That was not you know
that's
the
pretty
scene I'm
gross.
talking about.
Yeah, I think I do.
Oh, that was a scene and a half. Speaking of uh 80s alien stuff, have you seen the new Stranger Things?
I have never gotten into Stranger Things. I tried to get into it recently, but I didn't continue for whatever reason. I think I just like forgot to watch. I was on season one. It looks like an interesting concept. But what I've heard is what's interesting about Stranger Things is if you know how Dungeons and Dragons works, you can
Yep.
kind of predict how the whole movie, the not movie, the whole series like comes together from the initial Dungeons and Dragons thing, which
Interesting.
which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a parallelism to it. Although by season 4, I started watching it again with my girlfriend, and into the second episode when they're trying to figure out sort of the antagonist of the series or of the season, they say, "Oh, it's just
Oh,
like
you're gonna
this evil
spoiler that
wizard."
because I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
Okay,
I'll be
cool.
careful about it. Also, this is like episode 2. If you're listening to it,
Hey,
like,
if
go watch the
someone's
first episode.
listening and they don't know, I haven't watched Stranger Things. Also,
Fair enough. Okay. The point being is that there's an antagonist. There's an antagonist in every one of the seasons. And by the fourth season, you would have thought that they'd be like, maybe we should just stop playing Dungeons and Dragons. Because, like, every time it's some famous villain
oh really?
from D&D that's an almost perfect analogy for what we're facing. It's like, maybe now
Oh,
is the time to put away D&D. I don't know. It's just if you kept if you were like playing snakes and ladders and various maybe like pythons
various
and
snakes
cobras
and
were breaking
ladders
into your home and
through
you bought a
ladders.
new and every time you bought a new version of snakes and ladders, that exact snake species would break into your home. Maybe you just stop maybe you'd either move houses or stop buying snakes
But
and
but Rick,
ladders.
but Rick, correlation does not equal causation.
Yeah, they say that, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm suspicious. I'm just trying to bait in everyone. The way this episode will work is the way to attract guests is to just aggravate every single degree, and then people want to come on to set the record straight.
That's true.
Yeah,
That is
philosophy
very
isn't
true.
even a real discipline. It's just
Oh,
it's
you can't say
outdated.
that. Oh,
Yeah, people say that it's like the originator of all the sciences, love of knowledge, Democritus with his idea of atoms like thousands of years ago. I'm suspicious. Who's to say that Europeans didn't like come up with like later medieval Europeans or even like 18th century people came up with the idea of atoms, but they were like, I need to legitimize this. If I just come up with an ancient Greek, who's going to verify? I'm just going to invent a text. And then why is it? There's just something about this format just lends itself to wild,
that's true.
unsubstantiated ideas.
Hmm.
I asked a person studying maths at Oxford um, whether or not they think that mathematical concepts are discovered or invented. Do you want to weigh in?
I think we might have discussed this briefly on the last episode, but like if you really think about it, like if in theory, if there was no creator of the world, so mathematical concepts have never been discovered previously until we discovered it. Unless you come up with another theory in which humanity cycles and then ends itself and then recycles again, which maybe humans or some other intelligent species might have come up with it before. In that case, it would be rediscovered. Well, discovered, but I think if we go through our knowledge and assume that there has never been an intelligent species on our planet, well, in our stratosphere, wherever we are, um, then you could argue that it's been discovered. I like to think that they were discovered because I don't know. I don't. in our knowledge, no one else has discovered it before, so
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't
Have
really
you?
know how else to argue that. But I guess it's
No,
because
that's
it's so theoretical. You can't really like unless I make some sort of philosophical argument that's like has no logical fallacies. I just build it.
sometimes you need a logical fallacy. Just sometimes you just want a couple.
You just need a logical fallacy.
Well, I was reading. I even just check it here in the notes. I was reading this book called Outliers, which sort of details different success stories, and it challenges the idea of how we perceive success in the West.
Mm,
In the first chapter, it talks about how, for instance, Bill Gates um, was at a very affluent high school, and he was at a American high school that had the one of the first to have access to a computer where one could code for many hours in a day. And so I think that book is actually where the 10,000 hour rule originates from. And likewise, in the chapter before that, the author mentions the idea that the best ice hockey players in Canada are all born in the first 3 months of the year because of the way that the tryouts cut off. And so a
mm.
person born in January can compete with someone that's actually 6 months younger than them or 8 months younger than them. And therefore, the coaches will think, oh, they've always been big and coordinated and just being able to push aside the other players, when in actuality, that's just because they're older. But then by the time that they go into the higher leagues, they've been practicing for 8 hours a day weekly, whereas the kids that were born in August or September have only been practicing for
I'm
two
gonna throw
months.
something in here. I'm gonna
Oh,
throw
sorry.
something in here. Do you
Go ahead.
think that
Hmm.
if a teacher sees a student as capable, is that what and then develops that student's growth, or was it some inherent talent that they had which the teacher picked up on? And it's a cause and effect thing, isn't it? But I mean,
Mm.
from some studies, like you see that if the teacher believes that the student is good, then the student becomes good.
I think it's both. It's sort of like asking, what foot do you use to walk? It's the left and the right, and one sets up the other one repeatedly. Um,
Mm,
but there can definitely be a preponderance of one over the other. Sometimes you can have sort of tragic situations where a student is phenomenally talented, but because of the environment that they're in or because they have a very disagreeable personality, that isn't recognized until much later. And you can also have the inverse where someone's extremely charismatic and socially adept, or they're surrounded by teachers that, for whatever reason, are predisposed to sort of hyping up every student, for lack of a better term. And sometimes that can be great because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and sometimes
mm,
it can lead to people being promoted to a situation that they're just not sort of uh, predisposed towards, or I shouldn't say that, that they're not even that they don't even desire. And so, a lot of people wish that they could be the CEO of a company, but then if you wake up the next day and you have to spend 22 hours straight working on projects, and then if anything goes wrong, it's your fault, and then you try to have a coffee break and someone yells, "You don't have the time to do this," I don't think many people would really enjoy it. So it's like,
mm,
I don't know. I think it's both. But the point here is that often certain circumstances for famous individuals conspired to assist them far more than we usually think, because we prefer to just have this biography of like, oh, they worked really hard and then they were born really talented and then now they're the best. When in actuality, the month that they were born in might determine the resources that they had available. And that's not necessarily an excuse for everyone else to not work, but it's something to keep in mind so that you know
mm.
whether or not you're climbing uphill or climbing downhill. Or rather, you know, if you're fighting gravity or if gravity's on your side, so to speak.
Maybe we should start a conspiracy theory that these people who are talented actually bust
uh,
out their mothers.
oh. Well,
They
the
were the ones. They inspired Alien. Actually, is how it works
it could
for
be.
sure.
Well, the idea from that was that schools should split classes each year into three streams. So for January, February, March, and then April, May,
Oh,
June.
interesting.
And because
Has anyone
then
implemented this?
I don't think so, at least at the time of publishing, because it does make sense that, especially when you're younger, the difference between a January 5 year old and a October born 5 year old is massive. It's comparable to roughly a 20-year-old and a 23-year-old because it scales upwards. The difference between a 61 and a 62-year-old is minor, whereas the difference between a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old is huge proportionally. So yeah, and it makes me think because I started school a year early and I finished school a year late because I got moved around, and maybe I just want to go to school. I don't know, but it's definitely a unique experience. And now I'm a mature student, so I'm in a cohort where I'm like 3 years older than many, or at least two, and it's definitely a different dynamic. I don't know what your experience in school was, whether or not you were ever the youngest or the oldest in a classroom.
I mean, my birthday's in May, so I am one of the younger ones. But generally, I've seemed to be like pretty like decent compared to the rest of the class. So I guess in some situations, maybe it's just you're more likely to have the advantage at the start because you're more likely to have the advantage because you've had this extra time in your life to like learn things. Well, to be fair, now that I think about it, I am a year older than the majority of the cohort because I had to take the year off. So, in that sense, maybe there is like a certain level of maturity that I've learned through that year of having to be like see everyone do their things and like think about what I have to do, like the basically extended period of time to think about what I want to do. It now puts me in a situation where um I'm back in uni and like people are doing like the first year stuff, but I no longer want to do the first year stuff. If that makes sense.
Mm. What do you mean by first year stuff?
By first year stuff, I mean party like 24/7.
Mm,
I feel
mm.
like that's characteristic of a first year university student, and also just university students in general. But um, just because like it's kind of their first experience like partying or whatever. But I think what I realized is after like a month of like doing that, because I hadn't really done that before. I did it for a month, and I was like, okay, so it's the same thing every time. What is the point of doing this? I still kept
Yeah.
doing it just because peer pressure. Well, not really peer pressure, but my friend group went out a lot.
Yeah,
But
that's hard when you
yeah,
decide to make a lifestyle choice like that. I know, especially it's a bit or substantially more severe. But for alcoholics, for instance, if they choose to
mm,
not drink, one of the biggest obstacles is that all of their friends drink, and so and also if they hang around with their friends and just not drink, they're a living reminder because
yeah,
probably their friends don't have healthy drinking habits either. Of I'm better than you, and that causes tension. Just like being the one guy in a group of 8 that doesn't smoke, that's just standing
you
there.
think?
It depends on the person, but even among people that are good friends, if you're the one person that's abstaining from a behavior that people are aware is fundamentally unhealthy, it it creates a bit of friction that is then that can then set up for further developments. But it depends. I mean,
I wonder if this is
especially if
some
your friends are
personal
chain
experience.
smokers and like, oh, you quit. What makes you so good? Because they would rather that you smoke again than they stop smoking. It's kind of like Festinger's cognitive dissonance model, where we're just bringing in the psychology all the time here. Um, it's like,
1957 is the year,
oh
I
yeah,
think.
but yeah, we're gonna work citations just into real life. I mean, we are at this point. Um, yeah, I think that uh, it's much easier to convince yourself that smoking isn't that bad for you when everyone around you is smoking. But when it's like anti peer pressure, suddenly there's a dissenter.
Mm.
Ash, 1930, I forget.
1930?
When was
Isn't it
Ash's
in the
experiment?
40s? It's
I
somewhere in there. Anyways,
It's somewhere in there. Yeah.
but wouldn't you argue also that maybe it will make some people think of quitting smoking instead of
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Which maybe, I don't know. It's I've never been an alcoholic nor a chain smoker, so I can't weigh in. But it's interesting that Alcoholics Anonymous is such like a dedicated community, and yet many other
Hmm.
addictions don't have that same
It's
background.
because alcohol is legal. That's like the one reason that it's a thing. I feel like
Hmm. I feel like a lot of young people nowadays suffer from gaming addictions and from porn
very
addictions.
true.
Like, frankly, because to buy alcohol, you have to go to a store. To buy cigarettes, you have to go to a store. Video games and pornography are there. If you have
Mm,
an internet connection, you can find it. And once you know that it's there, if you have an addictive personality or if your social life is lacking, your brain really is craving a certain
Yeah.
set of neurochemicals. And so the options become go outside, take a risk. If you don't have a stable friend group, that's it could be a positive outcome or it could be a negative outcome. You could end up feeling worse than you did initially. Or this button that's guaranteed to make you feel good. And in the short term, it sounds like it's the best deal ever. Why should I go out and go to a bar or a sports club or even a Discord chat where people might not like me? I might even have to change the
Mm.
kind of person that I am, and not just to be a chameleon, but to genuinely reflect on, is my personality and the way that I behave and the way that I treat others the kind of person that I would like to be around? And if the answer is no, that takes a lot of work, and it can't be solved in an hour. It's painful work over weeks.
Oh
And
yeah.
so therefore, I feel like our generation, I feel like we belong to the same generation. We're roughly within the
I
same
mean, pretty
one.
much.
I'm an old
I mean,
Gen
are you
Zer.
technically Gen Z? Are you
I've been on
24?
TikTok. I Yeah, I've been on
Yeah,
TikTok, and I
24. So
don't.
let's see, 24 is 24 years
Oh
old
no.
Gen Z. We're looking this up, boys. I think it is though, actually. Um,
Jamie, pull that up.
People use 1995 as a starting point for Gen Z. So yeah,
Well, yep, I'm in there.
he's in
Well, I
there.
feel like it, and I'm busting it. No, it's weird that I think, because it's like Pornhub gets is the number 10 website in the world.
Yeah.
And what's disturbing about that is you don't have to be a licensed vendor to do that. And so those two, video games and pornography, and I guess you could add like obsessive use of social media, those don't have an AA yet. I feel like that should come in, because for some
Mm,
people it's a mild thing, some people completely abstain, and then there'll be a group of outliers for whom it is ruinous. And um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it is something that should be done. But the problem is that there probably isn't a huge bottom line to it, whereas there's a huge bottom line to engaging in the sale of those things, because you're tapping into, it's kind of like farming is a difficult endeavor, but people are always going to want to eat. People are always going to want to eat. You're guaranteed to have people who want to eat. And it's the same way with
yeah.
games and porn. It's built in. When it comes to some newfangled piece of technology, you don't yet know if that's something that actually is in demand. So
Mm,
I don't know. It's a weird tangent. It's a bit of a dark thought, but I feel like that should happen because it's happening in homes rather than out on streets. If you're walking down the street of a city and then you just see people wandering around drunk, then yeah, that needs to be
yeah.
fixed. But what you don't see is all of the young teenage men and women, or boys and girls, all the young people holed up in their homes that are becoming more and more reluctant to even have friends. I think there's a loneliness epidemic,
Yeah.
and
There is a
the only way
loneliness
to solve it
epidemic.
is kindness. Which sounds kind of mushy washy. It's like, oh, you're gonna be kind to people, but it's like recently I've discovered that I've been, at some level, I have made the mistake too often of mistaking kindness for weakness, when in fact kindness is a great strength.
Mm,
To be perpetually kind, sorry about that, I'll turn that off. To be perpetually kind to people that you don't yet know very well can either be a very naive thing if you've never been through anything, or, as is the case for many people above the age of 16 or 18, you've been through a lot and you know the full range of what human beings can do to another human being. And if you choose to still be kind to someone you don't know that well, that's a very strong form of bravery. And it's underappreciated. I don't
oh
know.
yeah. I mean, they talk a lot about why would someone be? Why would I think the question that's asked a lot is why would you be good when being bad can still lead to good things, kind of thing. And it's like, well, the reason you should like strive to be good, well, you don't strive to be good because you will get good things out of it. You strive to be good because just for the sake of being good, because inherently, like, you can do good things and sometimes bad things will come, but you can do bad things, sometimes good things will come, and vice versa. But I think by just striving to be good, it's like, I guess you can bring in morality into here. What is the right thing to do? But by being good is not an easy thing to do because otherwise everyone would do it. and it's
Mm.
not necessarily a beneficial thing to do because otherwise everyone would do it. So I guess to be good in a world where it's not necessarily um, rewarded is quite admirable for me, anyways. I strive
No,
to be like that.
100%. Shout out to all the kind people in the world. Y'all are
Shout
doing
out
better than me.
if you guys are kind, join follow the
No, it's
podcast and be a guest if you are from an Oxford student, or if you're not an Oxford student. I don't know. Maybe there's another podcast that Rick's doing at this point in time.
the unkind podcast. We'll just
The
have the haters
unkind
podcast. It
podcast.
will be the same guests, but with like mustaches attached. We'll be our own evil
Oh yeah,
cousins and just hate on things. Yeah. Hmm. What's the most profound experience you've ever had in your life?
the most profound experience.
Yeah.
Hmm. That's
Or
a
up
strange
there that
one.
you're comfortable sharing on a recording? What do you think is a single experience that reshaped the way that you see the world, or that sometimes comes to mind and you think, oh my god, that was just something out of a movie, something that it could only happen to me then and there?
Yeah, one time I watched Naruto. I'm joking. It's not
No,
Naruto.
I mean, for me Naruto was
Some
kind of
people, yeah, I
profound.
had to. For you, it actually changed you. That's why I brought it up. I'm
Oh yeah,
interested
did
in
you
how
see
that
that no, go ahead.
shapes your personality. But we'll go into that after this. But mine is just I was listening to this book by Eckhart Tolle. It's called The Power of Now. I was just
Mm-hmm.
listening to the audiobook while I was on a coach. I believe I was around 17 or 18. And I was on a coach going to. My families were on holiday basically. They left me at home because they had this volunteering thing. That's like I was basically going after them on the coach. It was like an 8 hour journey in total. So it's quite long. Um, but it was literally just me sitting in the coach listening to this book. And it's basically just telling me like be present, or like basically if you look at your hands, focus on all the things on your hand. Have you ever really looked at these lines on your hands? Probably not, because you don't really pay attention to things half the time. And that was kind of a moment of me just being like, what if I'm try to be present this entire trip and literally just take everything in? And I remember when there was a stop that we got off at, and I was still listening to the audiobooks, and the next bus would come in like an hour. So I was just wandering around, and I went into this shopping, not just a shopping center, supermarket. And I don't know, it just felt so good to walk into that supermarket and just look at things instead of, because majority of the time you go into the supermarket, you're like, oh, whatever, I'm gonna go buy stuff. But walk into a supermarket for the sake of doing it, just because why not, and just experiencing the supermarket as it was, and like all the escalators going on it, and just feeling how that felt. I guess it was a
Hmm.
moment in my life where I realized you don't need too much to be happy. You just need to be able to kind of have that state somehow, which is why a lot of people strive for enlightenment or whatever, because that enlightenment is in theory that state eternally. But I was in that state for like a good few hours, so that was like really mind blowing. Kind of like you are not who you thought you were. You're just kind of the thing that experiences everything.
And have
Very
you
strange
been able to
experience.
return to that feeling again?
At times through conscious meditation. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes meditation is a bit painful, which is why people don't really go towards it, because it's not well, it in theory meditation is meant to be an easy thing to do, where you sit down and you let everything happen, so you're not actually doing anything. But by sitting down and letting everything happen, it means all the pain happens as well. And we're very averse to that
Hmm.
pain, so we don't like to face it or just
I've
let it
never heard it
happen.
said that way. That makes a lot of sense. By sitting down, that makes all the pain happen as well. And it's something we don't usually engage with. I think that summarizes why I stopped meditating. I did the fundamentals courses on Headspace. I
Mm.
made my way through all of those. I think there's like 6 or 7 of them.
There's quite a lot of
I
those.
meditated a lot during the vacation, and I found it harder to meditate during study time in high school and university, although ostensibly that's when you need it the most. And then when I was at Oxford and I was really stressed, I once sat down in the half lotus on a little Zen cushion that I had. I was Zafu, I believe is the term. I was there. I had my little mudra, all of the superficial things that aren't actually related to the true value of meditation. Regardless, I
Yeah.
sit down, I start counting my breaths, some sort of, and then I just started feeling like these heat flashes. My whole body felt like it was on fire, and I was like breaking a sweat, and I felt like there was this massive invisible pressure on my head that was just gonna um, crush it. I felt like there was just this invisible force pushing down on me, and then it was pushing down all over my body, and I just felt uh, sort of unbearably um, heated. Not like I was on
Mm.
fire, but like the fire was inside of me and boiling me. And then I just had to stop. And I haven't really meditated since, but it freaked me out just how I was trying to sort of let go, and I was trying to just sort of view my conscious experience as a blue formless sky, and then clouds that just pass through as sort of thoughts and attachment and
Mm.
ideas. But fundamentally there's just this formless empty space that represents one's phenomenological experience of the world, and then that's the fundamental backdrop that you can't grasp, only experience it. However, all of that mumbo jumbo fell out the window when I was just
Yeah.
caught in it. And it felt like I was trapped in this giant eagle's claws. And the harder I tried to get out of it, the more they locked in. And I guess I just couldn't let go. I couldn't just be like, yeah, this is fine. But that it's like that Chinese finger trap where
And when you
the
try
harder you
harder,
try to push out,
yeah.
it's an ingenious device. It's an ingenious device in what it represents. That sometimes the ability to just say, let it be. It is what it is exactly what gets you out. But if you get caught up thinking that, then you you're you're not doing it with your heart in the right place. You're only letting go so that you can get what you want. But fundamentally, you can only get what you want if you let go of the thing that you want genuinely. And I'm
Mm.
fairly certain that that was the kind of paradox that the Buddha was attempting to sort of the bodhisattva, uh, which apparently translates to the awake one. I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
which is kind of wild. Is that, and I guess the new age version of that is often to get what you want, you have to want it slightly less. That if you want something too much, you actually can't get it because you're pulling too hard on the finger trap and you're never actually pushing together. And it creeps me out. I've been thinking about that all this week of when if I want something, if I just take it to like 60 or 70% seriousness, that's not the same as zero, but it ends up being more productive than 150 because then I'm not paralyzed by like, oh, it has to turn out this way. I just sort of do it. And then if it works out, then great. And if it doesn't, I'll try again.
Yeah. That experience that you said of the kind of heat just pushing in or well, pushing out of yourself or in to yourself, it's interesting because mindfulness in and of itself is people use it as a tool to focus or a tool to, I guess, control their emotions, and which you can do with mindfulness. But the main goal actually of like mindfulness is this letting go. And by letting go, it doesn't mean like getting your emotions out. It doesn't mean necessarily like do you know when you get into a downward spiral and then you just keep thinking, the emotion gets worse and worse? It doesn't mean that. Because they say you need to feel your emotions. That's not what it means. It's letting go of the resistance to feel your emotions or to feel whatever's going on within yourself. Because the resistance, we always have this resistance, especially in social situations. We repress our sadness, we repress our kind of you know, anxieties to just kind of like, hey, put yourself out there and be charismatic because you want to look good in front of these people. But when you're on your own, we still have this barrier up, which is why I think social media addiction is such a big thing. Because, and also just listening to music sometimes, even, because doing that is like escaping yourself. There is never a moment in our days where we have to be with ourselves anymore. And I think it causes a lot of just mental strain. A lot of people argue also. I don't necessarily believe this, but this is just something that is said to do with mindfulness. People have claimed that being able to feel their emotions and let go of like all this past trauma by just letting it happen and just kind of feeling it and not judging it. Sorry, not judging it as a bad thing. Because I think another thing that we do is we see an emotion, we're like, that's bad, get rid of it, which causes more resistance, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do with mindfulness. But people have said that being able to do that has caused physical what's it called, manifestations of it to like decrease. Like
Hmm.
people who have had like always had like a backache for ages, and then like they've done this Let Go thing for like a year, and like they no longer have this backache that was like unexplained. It's insane. I don't 100% believe it, but I think there is an aspect of that that's quite interesting to look into, because I guess it's just because we cause ourselves so much stress, it causes a lot of like physical things, and to get rid of that stress, to get rid of it, we're not necessarily getting rid of it, we're just letting it happen through
Letting it
mindfulness.
go its course in a
Yeah.
way. It's like if you have a movie that's you can't actually pause permanently. You can only pause it like rewind for 10 minutes. And if the first 5 minutes of the movie are great and then the next 5 minutes are really horrible and scary, every single time you press the rewind button and then you get the 5 minutes of great and then you keep on pressing the rewind after. They're like, oh, whereas it's my understanding that the better way to do it is trust that the movie actually gets even better. And if you
Mm.
just let the slider play through that unpleasant part, you get through it and it lasts a bit longer, but then it's gone for good because you made it through. You didn't give in to the temptation to just press the rewind button. You went all the way through and now you're at the better place and you don't have to go back there because it ran its course naturally. Something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, but it's such a painful thing, right? To let it happen, because there's so much pain that happens, especially if you have built up pain from like the past, or like built up negative emotions that you haven't been able to feel, because they just kind of, they say you store it in a bottle until it like explodes, right? And it, like the cap flies off or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is a good metaphor for it, because the way I see it is, by letting it happen, you take the cap off and you let the mist come out like slowly but
Mm.
surely. And the mist is very unpleasant. Like it's a terrible mist that's like stinks. But if you just let it happen and not necessarily see it as a bad thing, you just see it as something that needs to happen, or something that you need to experience in order to get to the other side, basically, without fueling it with thoughts. Which is why in mindfulness they say you try to get rid of thoughts. You're not really getting rid of thoughts. You're just like seeing the thought, letting it go. Well, seeing it and then just being like, where did that come from? And then not necessarily stockpiling, just
Hmm.
letting it dissipate and letting the emotions dissipate until eventually there is another side to this, depending on like where you are. This is what they say. But let's say there's like this line. For one person, this is the line. Like it's about like 10 centimeters long, and then they have 10 centimeters of pain to get through to be good. For another person, it could be like 2 miles of line, which slowly but surely they need to chip away at it. Like from, I guess, times of being on their own, they can like chip away some bits and just keep moving forward until eventually they get to like a side which is really nice. I don't think you can ever really get rid of negative emotions, but I think accepting it is like a first step to getting there, which is very difficult. It's definitely not easy for me when I did that like a few years back, because I remember I would actually just sit by myself. This is what I learned from like some videos I watched. It was weird, but you literally sit by yourself. I think you've done this also when you ask yourself like just questions like, why do I feel this way about this certain thing, and you eventually arrive at a conclusion. It's like I did that, but and then instead of continuing, I would just stop and just let, and then just like examine what I was feeling in my body for like a good like hour or two.
Oh my.
And sometimes I'd just be
An hour
crying
or
for
two.
like no
Whoa.
reason. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's because I had the time back in the day. You know, when you're like in sixth in like school, you don't have that. You don't need to do everything all the time. So you have the time. If you don't have the time, you can do this in like 10-minute chunks. You know, but I would literally just be crying for like what seemed like no reason, but there's probably a reason for it. But I kind of just
Hmm.
let it happen until at the end you just feel like a moment of bliss. It's kind of like, why do you feel that moment of bliss? Probably because you know, when you like you have such a heavy bag and then you just kind of like drop it. It felt like that. Um,
Interesting. And so for
which
those
is
listening, what apps, and for me as well, I mean, what apps do you
what
use? What
apps.
what regimen do you have? What would you
Um,
recommend to someone who's never meditated before and would like to try it, or
okay.
someone who has before and would like to try it again?
I've only recently got into it again, because I realized I needed to go through that again, somewhat, because of, I guess, I took the year off and then like I didn't really meditate. Then I didn't really deal with my stuff because it was like health problems, blah blah blah. But I'd recommend Waking Up by Sam Harris. I know everyone recommends Headspace. Get Headspace if you can afford it. The good thing about Waking Up is that there is this thing, the student plan or something, where literally you can put in your email, put in your thing, and they give you 6 months for free. If you can't, like, they say, hey, if you can't afford this, we want everyone to be able to use it. So, um, they can either choose a discounted plan or you can choose a free plan, like
Oh
literally.
wow, damn,
So
that's really good.
yeah, I think if you look up scholarship waking up app is what it's called, something like that. I'll send you the link after also, Rick.
Oh
And
okay.
also the thing I like about this, Headspace now has this, but I think Waking Up had it before, is where they had like little lessons. There's like why you do mindfulness or like what to actually expect out of mindfulness. So don't expect that everything will be fixed. It's kind of just like, because what it also allows you to do is when you are angry, instead of letting the anger take over and being angry at everyone, it's like you just let it happen, and then when you let it happen, it usually goes away so much faster than if you keep fueling it with like, oh, I hate this person, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
um so that's really the goal of it, and to just be present, really, just to try to be able to, when you have tasks and you hate it, you're much more able to do that task if you just like, hey, like, literally, I could be doing literally anything right now, and but no matter what I do, I can be present with that. So if I can be present with a revision and literally just, when you get into a revision, you get into a flow state. You can. Is what I've been doing
Yeah.
this recently. I've just been like, okay, literally listen to every word he's saying, feel every key that I'm typing, and
Mm.
it gets you into the state where like 1 2 hours passes, and you're like, oh, nice. Sometimes
So
I
rather
can't
than
get into that,
escaping,
but
I feel like I've been doing it the wrong way because when I've been doing some stuff that I don't want to do, my mind is racing a mile a minute. I'm thinking, oh, what am I doing here? I'm getting older. I should be out there signing up for open mics, getting back into the comedy. And what if I,
mm,
rather than coding in R, I went back into doing Python and stuff, and wasn't that video game idea, but that would take 6 months. And then I'm reading articles and I'm revising, but a large portion of my mind is just out
yeah,
there, and it's and fundamentally, if I've decided that begrudgingly the end result of what I'm doing is very much worthwhile, and
mhm,
perhaps even forcing myself to do something that I don't immediately want to do is in and of itself a valuable experience because it
mm.
teaches me to do things that aren't immediately appealing but fundamentally beneficial. And yet throughout the whole experience I'm actually missing out the magic of it because I'm distracted. I'm not actually being there. So I think
It,
I'm gonna try that out and see if I get those hot flashes again.
good luck. Honestly, it's not easy. I was gonna say also, I do have that also. Like, more than half the time, I my mind is everywhere when I'm trying to revise. I'm like, oh, I want to do this thing. Or like, what am I doing with my life? Or like, what am I gonna do after uni? Like, do I even want to do this? Like, blah blah blah. And it's so infuriating. That's when you don't want to revise. That's when you're like, oh, I just want to lie down in bed, do nothing, literally. Uh, but there are some periods of time, which is like maybe like once every few days, or like sometimes once a day, if I'm a good thing, where I'm literally revising. I'm like, yeah, this is sick. I'm like, I don't know why.
Yes, yes. Those are the golden moments that just come out of nowhere.
It doesn't
Damn.
make sense. Like, I was looking at the Basil member, I was like, that's so cool. Like, it like wiggles, and then like you hear a sound and like whatever. But sometimes I find it hard to wrap my head around. Like, for example, I was looking at the media violence and aggression lecture, and I was just like, no. I was literally just
Yeah.
typing it blindly. I was like,
Yeah.
I want to finish it so fast. I don't want to do this anymore. And it's
No, that
it's
makes
such a
sense.
contrast, right? Such a contrasting experience.
Well, I guess the discipline is of realizing that that's only one channel in a multi-channel
Mm.
experience, and that sometimes you're vibing with it and sometimes you're not vibing with it, but
Yeah.
underlying that experience is the idea that I'm gonna do it anyway, and if I keep doing it, it's like a contract. On the one hand I get the unpleasant experiences, but on the other that's the precondition for having those great days. if I just wait for the great days to occur, I'm actually only, the likelihood that I'm going to actually get what I want is very low. It makes me think of that David Goggins clip when he visited Cameron Haynes. I forget the name of it, but it's a phenomenal one. I've listened to it on repeat when I I used to do a little bit of running, and then I thought, what if I ran around the entirety of Hyde Park in one go with very little preparation? I was like, surely not. And so I did it while listening to that 12 minute Goggins thing just on repeat. It was wonderful. It was a beautiful experience. Um, Knocked me out though for a while, so don't recommend it unless it's like a competition. My vibe is to go at like 70% while training, and then if it ever does come down to like some achievement, then you go 120
100%,
because
yeah.
that knocks you out. But he says, to paraphrase him, you can't explain to people how to do well. Just, I don't want to read a book from a person sitting back with a nice cup of coffee there, some professor. I want to hear the story of the guy who went down into hell, because that's the only place you discover what you can go through. To someone who was thinking, why am I here? And my wife and my kids, and what am I doing here? And still found a way to get
Mm.
through that. That's so maybe if you're getting all of those thoughts of like, why am I here and what's this for and is this really worth it? That's actually counterintuitively the indicator that says, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm having doubts. I'm getting a bit anxious, because you only really get doubts when you're standing at the edge of the diving board. If you're just standing there at the side of the pool watching other people do the backflips, you don't have any doubts. You just I'm here. It's
Yeah,
when you're actually on the precipice of doing
that's true.
something meaningful that you start to be like, do I really want to do this? And then as you get better as a diver, you think, I do. Not because I'm 100% confident, but exactly because I'm doubting it. That's a sign that I'm on the precipice of meaning.
I'm thinking. I'm thinking Goggins is actually the way uh he tells you, like he basically like, oh, just keep going no matter what. You got to do it, otherwise, like, what's the point, right? I think to one extent it's a really good message, because I think by forcing yourself to do it, there is a time, like for example, if you're physical exertion, which is like mostly what he's talking about, majority, because he did do some studies himself and like went through that as well. But when he was going through like the running, like what, when you're running, like there's a point where you have to be present, you have to be there, otherwise you will just stop. Like it forces you to become in that space where you're just like feeling literally everything, all the pain, all the freaking, the sweat on your face, but you love it because you're actually there, I think. Well, you don't you feel like you hate it, but you also kind of love it.
I
It's an
do,
interesting
yeah. No,
relationship,
I
right?
100%. Yeah, when running, that's those moments. I actually nowadays I try to avoid listening to Goggins mixes because I know I'm going to go
Mm.
300% and then not be able to go the next. Well, I am, but there's like this resistance. Whereas
Mm.
if I always leave a little bit left at the gym, I'll do one less exercise than I wanted to do. The next day I go because I'm like, oh, I got to keep going. I left a little bit unfinished. Maybe
Mm.
that's not the best strategy, but it's what's worked for me to treat it a bit more like a flow like dance rather than a jerking motion. Like just like I'm gonna push myself in there. Cause that's like that leads
Yeah, I get it.
to perhaps not the best I'm just going out there to the gym to go jerk. That's not, but like as in this sort of janky motion rather than like
Mm.
a flow of. I started listening to like funk jazz rather than anime inspirational, because with the anime inspirational it's phenomenal and I'll go hard on the one set and I'll be like, yeah, and then I'll the next day I'll be like, oh god, I have to do that again. Whereas when I get into a flow and I'm not slacking, but I'm doing the effort just with
Mm-hmm.
a bit of patience. The next day I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I did that. I'll do it again. It's fun. It gets hard, but it's also good, and it won't be that bad, and it will also be quite good. I don't know, but maybe that's kind of a bit counter to Goggins, who's just like just put yourself through hell
I mean,
without any
the way I
thought
see
about the
it,
future, and then
Goggins.
you only have to be in hell today,
Mhm.
and then tomorrow never comes. You just have to be in hell today.
Yeah, I think Goggins really helped me at a point in my life. Like, there's a point in my life where Goggins like was like the guy I listened to for like everything. I was like, okay, I got it. Like for example, when I was trying to get into Oxford, I would listen to him a lot back then. Um, but I think there's a point where like not everyone is built like that. Like
Hmm.
to a guy who runs and his legs are literally broken and he is still running, that
That's
is insanity. This guy is like a machine, and I don't think everyone needs to be a machine. Like so for some people, that's not what they need to do with their life, kind of thing. Like I think
mm, yeah.
it's a good way to get you up. Like I think it's a good way to, for a person who is doing nothing, listen to Goggins. He is absolutely amazing. But for a person who is already putting in so much effort and is burning out, I don't think it's. I think they then need. I think it's a balance between the mindfulness aspect and the go and fucking do it. No, sorry, go and do it aspect. Bleep that out,
No,
or yeah,
no,
mark that in.
100%. But even Goggins mentions, I think a lot of the content that people experience are clips that people take of him that
True.
are just the sort of most intense parts. But I recall, I think it was, I forget if it was in his book or in one of his Joe Rogan interviews, but he mentions that when he first started, he wanted to run 12 miles and then he would run 1 mile and it would make him want to give up. But he would just trust that it's part of the process.
Mm,
And then he'd run 2 miles and three, and then sometimes he'd hit the goal and sometimes he wouldn't. And I think that that's something that's overlooked in Goggins's mindset. It's that you should set a high bar, but you shouldn't beat yourself up when you don't reach it, just as much as you shouldn't give yourself too many praises when you do reach it. And the idea that comes to mind is a phenomenal coach, Kess, shout out to him at Kevlar Fitness and Urban Warriors, which sounds a bit wild coming from this, but it's a phenomenal gym out next to Vauxhall. They're just renovating now, and all the people there are legends. But Kess, who's one of the main guys there, I think he's even the owner, said, it's good that you're coming in to train. But to paraphrase here, that's like, it's the trajectory that matters. It's the improvement that matters. Because if you want to be like that, and he's pointing to like the most buff guy in the group, you can, but when you get there, you'll be depressed if that's the only reason you're coming here. Because
mm,
once you get there, you'll be like, okay, now I'm here and it's not as good as I thought it would be. It's good, but not as good. I've been waiting for this for years. Whereas if your whole idea is to just get a little bit better forever, on the one hand, that seems daunting because it never ends. But beyond that thin layer of sort of aversion, if you go one step deeper, it's actually the best, because then for as long as you live, every day is a
mm.
little victory. Anyway, that sounds like some sort of Instagram in the kitchen suburban vibe of just like one glass of wine a day is a little victory.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a parallel to that. That is a very different thing.
Oh
But
yeah.
I get what you mean. Like people say that, there are a lot of people who are rich that always say like, you don't want to be that guy crying in like your Ferrari, or whatever. And then people like cynically say, well, I'd rather be in a Ferrari crying than a thing and like not be crying. But in reality, it's like, do you really want to be a depressed guy? Like,
Mm.
do you want to be in that level and then realize that it's empty? But I guess it's the thing is it's always hard to wrap your head around because people are always like, including myself sometimes. I'm like, I'd rather be there and know that first.
Well, Carl
But
Jung
why?
had a.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But I'm like, why can't we learn from their mistakes? It's such a ego thing, man, and I gotta like, work on that. But what were you saying about Carl Jung?
Well, I listened to I think it's his book on archetypes on Audible when I go to and from the gym via bike, and it's a really interesting experience. Jung is, I could talk about him for a while, but probably in another episode. We got to do another.
Yeah.
There's fountains of info here. But he made this point about how people believe that by surrounding themselves with wealth, they can somehow improve their internal world. But fundamentally, the limit to how much profundity you can interface with externally
Mm,
is the level of profundity that you've developed internally. If you're internally profound, then you can experience the profound everywhere. But if you're internally impoverished and you've never developed your own sense of self and you've never established a relationship with your own internal world, you can be surrounded by the wealth of the world and you'll still be miserable and you won't be
yeah.
able to experience it. If you expose yourself to profound works of art, music, sculpture, if you go to these incredible experiences and view incredible human beings that have dedicated their life to a particular pursuit, if internally you're still shallow and superficial, you won't be able to experience any of those events beyond the shallow and superficial. And it's a very common trapping that you can simply earn the money, buy something rich and profound, and then just by having it as an external, perceptual, experiential, phenomenological experience, that will somehow leak into your world. But Jung, who actually invented the terms extrovert and introvert, and who, in contrast to Freud, was an introverted person who was more
Mm,
interested in sort of his inner world than the external world. Jung proposed this idea that no, first you want to cultivate the riches within yourself, and then no matter where you go, you will have that capacity to
mm.
experience the world, not the other way around. You'll never develop. It's putting the horse before the cart before the horse. You have to develop the internal in order to experience the external profundity. So, and that's sort
Yeah,
of stuck with me. That I think for me, that's been a trapping. I haven't developed my internal, the relationship with myself, and really understanding who it is that I am, because I've just been trying to expose myself to like comedy or MMA or like all of these things. And like you said, it's hard to just be alone, because when you're
it's
alone,
so hard, man.
there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain that's built up there, and you think, oh, but it's like jumping into the cold water or ripping off a band-aid. It's the precondition. You have to pay a little bit to
Mm.
get in. You have to pay the entrance fee. But when you get in, it's a great time. You just have to pay that entrance fee and not just stand around next to the sort of event there and just be like, but the ticket, it's worth it. It's
I
worth
want to
it.
bring in just an anecdotal thing very quickly. We should end this soon
Yeah, we
because
should.
this is
Yep.
going on for a while. But I just want to
Yep.
bring this in. Like, I've been teaching my girlfriend a bit about this mindfulness thing recently and just feeling emotions because her whole life she's been kind of being strong with her emotions, never shown it to anyone because she's kind of had to be. And like, just telling someone they don't have to be strong anymore is it's a big step also to start doing this. And for some, I'm really proud of her because like to be able to take in something that's like basically saying you haven't done this for your entire life, but you need to do it because like maybe what you were doing before was not the best thing to do. And that I think this is also why people are so hesitant to accept different views just generally because it's like, hey, maybe the thing you thought your entire life might have been not 100% correct, which it's hard to throw that out the window, to then be like, okay, this other thing. But anyways,
Mm.
she's got to a point where she says that she's the most present she's ever been in her life most recently, and she's walking around once because it was after work, she's waiting for the bus, and she saw a yellow door. It's like a bright yellow door, and she started crying because the door was so yellow and it was amazing.
Hmm.
Like what?
Yeah,
How
on
can
the
you cry
one
of
hand, it
happiness
sounds
from?
insanely comical, but on the other hand, I can see how that's a deeply gratifying experience. That's, yeah, no,
So
that
I think it does work. Um,
to be that impacted by the world, that's to have that interfacing relationship, to really be dancing with the world rather than just sitting up in the bleachers watching the world from afar. Yeah.
yeah, she's went through a lot of pain also to get to that point because I mean you got to push people sometimes if you know that they can do it, and I think you can definitely get to that point. It's just a matter of doing it, which is the hard part. But I'll send you the waking up app. It's been helping me a lot recently as well.
Oh, great stuff. And maybe I'll leave it in the podcast description for those that do listen and want to experience this for themselves. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
very, very cool. This has been, as always, a really, really cool conversation.
we've done this twice. We've done this twice.
But look, always is an extendable. I was inclusive of the tutorials and like the real life
Okay,
conversations, but no, you got a point. I think it's time for us to bust out. This has been really good. It's time to do a bit of revision. It's time to do a bit of
ah,
stuff.
oh
Hopefully,
no,
we can integrate the dialogue that we've had today, and hopefully the audio quality is a bit better.
it definitely is. It sounds better on my part. So.
The advantage is that we're going to have incredible improvement in the early episodes. That is going to be difficult to maintain further unless I get a dude in a lab coat filming me. We're doing all that. It's coming full circle.
Maybe it's coming full circle, guys. And then we're gonna
Yeah.
have like Sam Harris himself, the guy who made the app. He's gonna be like, guys, you gotta. Shut
Episode
up.
1, Luther. Episode 2, Luther. Episode 3, Sam Harris.
Yo, imagine. That'd be insane, actually. That'd
Uh,
actually be insane.
you
And that
guys are
would no
just that
longer be the
present.
OxPod, though. That would no longer be the OxPod.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the OxPod. We have to stay true to our root. Yeah, well, I mean, unless we make him an honorary student at Oxford, that's the prerequisite.
If we just say that he is, in theory, you're a theoretical honorary student, then
University of Oxford's kind of like a nebulous thing. You know, it's some
exactly,
people.
exactly.
It's collegiate. It doesn't actually. It's not actually a single place. It's a state of
Collegiate
mind.
system.
Anyway, this has been really good. Thank you so much, man. It's been phenomenal.
It's been a pleasure. What's up, mate?
I
Anyways,
love the soundboard. All
I've
right,
been
thank you so
Luther,
much,
and
man.
this has been Rick, your host. Rick is your host.
All right, take it easy, everyone.
See you next time.